Okay.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Barbara Malkus. I'm the superintendent for North Adams Public Schools. I'm opening a community forum with a brief presentation just so that I can share some of the results from our recent survey. I am going to be reading from a script because this is being recorded so that other people will be able to enjoy this as entertainment on local access television. So I want to make sure that I don't miss any of the highlights. So North Adams Public Schools was invited to participate in the Massachusetts School Building Authority program for consideration of a statement of interest for the Greylock Elementary School in December of 2019. Since then, a school building committee has been formed of various community stakeholders to consider our options for a new school or renovation. An owner project manager has been contracted and a design team selected. We are now at the point where some decisions need to be made to identify a preferred option to present to the MSBA. The first decision that we are seeking community input on is the grade configuration of our schools. Based on the enrollment of students and the projected enrollment for our schools, the student population will be able to be served by 3 schools instead of 4, which is our current configuration. As a 3-school system, we can consider 2 options: creating grade span schools or remaining with 2 pre-K through 6 elementary schools with 1 secondary school for grades 7 through 12. The Massachusetts School Building Authority is a quasi-independent government authority created in 2004 to replace the former School Building Assistance Program administered by the former Department of Education. The MSBA works with local communities to create affordable, sustainable, and energy-efficient schools across Massachusetts. The process through the MSBA is a long one, taking 5 to 7 years from statement of interest to project completion, with many interim steps. Throughout the process, a reimbursement to the city supports the identification of a preferred design option and construction of a renovated or new school building. So in other words, they are helping us pay for this school building, so we will abide by their rules and regulations for consideration of this project. The MSBA has approved the statements of interest for 2 possible grade configurations: a pre-K through 2 school or a pre-K through 6 elementary school. A new school project is an opportunity to envision the future of the school district and the educational opportunities it provides to our schools. Because projected enrollments indicate that the population of school-age children is declining, the MSBA identified that we will not have sufficient enrollment to warrant maintaining 3 elementary schools. However, the population distribution across the city will require geographic reassignment impacting all current district-assigned regions for Brayton Elementary School, Greylock Elementary School, and Colgrove Park Elementary School. Could you please click on the link to the enrollments? So I know this is hard to see from your seats. I don't expect you to be able to read that, but we will be providing this on our website. If you could go to the 4th sheet. So these are the 2 graphs. Well, the first graph there that appears to the left is a graph of our enrollment since 2018. And so you can see in the raw data there and in that graph, there is a continuous gradual decline of enrollment. That decline in enrollment is based on a study of population. So the MSBA looks at birth rates, death rates, the rate at which children who are eligible to enter our schools enter. They take in many variables and come up with a projected enrollment for the next 30 years. When you look at the graph along the right side now of the screen there, you can see that their projection continues to show a gradual decline over time for the next 30 years. So building a new school, we want to make sure we're building a new school to fit the current as well as our future student population. You can close that out and go to the next slide. So grade configuration is an important decision. And we've already talked about this, so we're going to move on. All right, so we have two options. Both of these have been approved by the Massachusetts School Building Authority for our consideration. In option one, we have a pre-K and a 3 through 6 elementary school. So pre-K through 2, 3 through 6. In option two, we have 2 pre-K through 6 elementary schools. There are several educational benefits for considering grade span schools, pre-K through 2 and 3 through 6. Our youngest students benefit from a school-wide focus on skill development. It allows for students in specialized programs to remain in their peer group and facilitates at least partial inclusion for students in substantially separate classrooms in the general education wherever possible. And it supports teacher collaboration across a particular grade level. It also allows the district to allocate resources with greater flexibility, expanding and contracting the number of sections based on the enrollment at that grade level. Option two, for 2 pre-K through 6 elementary schools, reduces the number of transitions before high school while allowing for some consolidation of resources. However, it may lead to some duplication of programs across schools. So option one, we would have a school on the west side, which would be our new school, representing early elementary education grades of pre-K through 2. Coldgrove Park Elementary School on the east side of the city would become our upper elementary school, representing grades 3 through 6, with our 1 7 through 12 high school. In option two, on the west side of the city, we would build a pre-K through 6 or renovate a pre-K through 6 elementary school. Coldgrove would remain a pre-K through 6 elementary school on the east side, with our 7 through 12 high school at Drury High School. So with our survey results, we had 877 total respondents, with 82.21% of the respondents representing residents of North Adams. Some of our faculty reside outside of the city, and some students attend North Adams by tuition agreement with North Berkshire School Union and Stamford, Vermont. The majority of responses came from parents at 44.01%, with 24.52% representing school staff and 22.35% of the respondents representing residents without current students or students who will be attending our schools in the future. So the top 2 bars represent yes and no to a pre-K through 2. The bottom 2 bars represent a yes and no with respect to a pre-K through 6. As you can see, the consideration of the 2 options was virtually the same, with 62.58% indicating a positive consideration of the pre-K through 2 option and 60.56% indicating a positive support for the pre-K through 6 option. The no's for pre-K through 2 were 37.42%, and the no's for pre-K through 6 were 39.45%. So anything less than 5% is considered not necessarily statistically significant. Next slide. Current parents and guardians of students enrolled in our schools. Again, very little difference, virtually no statistically significant difference in preference with parents and guardians, with 60.88% indicating yes for a pre-K through 2 option and 61.6% indicating a yes for a pre-K through 6 option. For the no's, pre-K through 2 was 39.12%, and for pre-K through 6, it was 38.4%. For faculty, there was a statistically significant difference, showing positive support for a pre-K through 2 option with 63.32%, indicating yes for this option, and 36.68% indicating no, while 58.12% indicated support for a pre-K through 6 option, and 41.88% indicated no. And then residents, just a reminder that our definition for resident was someone who resides in North Adams but does not currently have a student enrolled, or will have a student attending our schools in the future. Again, a slightly higher level of support indicated for pre-K through 2, with 64.78% indicating yes, and 35.22% indicating no, while 61.29% indicated support for the pre-K through 6 option, with 38.71% indicating no. So overall, there is a slightly higher preference for the pre-K through 2 option, and this option was most preferred by faculty and residents. With that, this is meant to be a community forum for comments, concerns, questions, anything that you feel is important for me to bring back to the school building committee when we meet. So with that, I would ask that you introduce yourself, what category you may be in as either a resident, a member of the faculty, or a parent and guardian, and make sure that you speak clearly so we're able to capture whatever is said in terms of comments.
Before we begin, Dr. Malkus, we just mentioned too that folks that are watching at home, there is a Q&A button on the Zoom screen, and if you have a question you'd like to submit, you can.
So questions from home may be submitted via the Q&A feature of the webinar, and please make sure that you write out your question, and Emily will help us facilitate getting those questions answered as well.
Dan Wallace, 81 Cherry Street, and I am a parent / guardian. Yeah, parent, yeah. Has the transportation issues that are attendant with establishing these different locations as different schools been looked at, and what impact is that going to have?
So there's been an initial review, but we haven't gone deep into looking at exact addresses and how many buses and things like that. However, with the initial review, the difference in the MSBA enrollment identification for square footage for a pre-K through 2 versus a pre-K through 6 was 20 students. So that's a really small number of students to have to figure out transportation for. There is also policy that governs our transportation and what transportation we offer, where that is more generous than what they are required to provide by state law. And so there would need to be a school committee consideration of policy around what that might look like. So depending on start and end times for our current bus configuration, right now we have 2 runs of buses. That could be altered so that there could be either 3 runs, or it could be 2 runs, or it could be 1 run for the early elementary that involves all of our buses, providing transportation for all students at the earliest elementary grade levels, which is what some school districts who have a grade span configuration do. And then their second run is upper elementary and high school, not combining those 2 student groups on the same bus because they'd be going in different places, but you would have all your buses available. And the transportation law with respect to what you're required to provide by transportation allows for some walkers at the upper grades. So, and quite frankly, you know, the law indicates that we actually don't have to provide high school transportation at all. However, that's unrealistic in our area because our high school, for our mother on the hill, right? It's very hard to access the high school given our winter conditions without transportation. So we know that transportation will have to have a deep dive, But in terms of overall numbers of students, it's not going to have a significant impact because the overall number of students between those two considerations is practically the same.
Thank you.
I have two questions which are going to sound unrelated to one another, and they sort of are. The first one, you mentioned the limited number of transitions as being a positive quality seen with option 2, I think it was. Why is that? And I'm just curious what the reason for that being a benefit is. I mean, I sort of get it, but I'm just kind of curious from a.
This is not an evidence-based or research-based decision. It is a perception. There is a perception that less disruption, more continuity, kids get settled into a school, they get used to a school culture, a school climate. Allowing for that continuity throughout their formative years is perceived to be an added benefit. There is also an added benefit to having all of our students in the same grade, in the same school, getting used to and forming those relationships and knowing one another so that when they do move on to the high school for the 7th through 12th grade, they already know each other. Because one of the things that you will hear from our colleagues at the high school is that whether it was in 9th grade, when it used to be 9th grade, or now in 8th grade, or now in 7th grade, when you bring all of those different students together from different parts of the city, there is an establishment of hierarchy. I like to refer to it as the Lord of the Flies event that happens as kids kind of try to figure out who they are. That's a time period in life where kids are trying to figure out their identity, and there is kind of a hierarchy to high school. And so that combination, no matter when it occurs, has its inherent challenges for anybody who's been a secondary educator.
So it reads kind of like that's net neutral, right? Like one sort of balance out the other. There's a community that you get to travel with your entire time as a student, or you're in the same building a longer period of time. And to me, that's sort of just.
Yeah, they are perceptual benefits.
Yes.
There hasn't really been any research that kind of shows that there's one advantage over another. But coming back to the whole middle school question, because several parents did comment on the survey, why aren't we considering reconfiguring to have a middle school? One is that the MSBA has not approved us for that kind of reconfiguration. And since they're paying 80% of the project, we're going to have to abide by their considerations. The other is that we built a very large, magnificent high school that has added capacity. Our current enrollment hovers around 500 in a school that was built to easily house 1,000. So, and that is with 7th and 8th grade being housed in the building. So that was approved by the MSBA in 2017 when we reconfigured and moved 7th grade up there to bring preschool into the elementary schools.
And then the second question I had, and you started to touch on this, the numbers are great. I'm curious if there's any, analysis of the comments that came through. Were there any threads of commonality, in the comments that folks made that might add some color to the specific responses that are captured in the numbers?
The one comment that I mentioned is the idea of configuring to house a middle school. The other was, that came up frequently from parents, was with respect to parents of families of children where there's a younger sibling and an older sibling that would cross that grade span, housed by 2 schools. That came up often as a concern, that if the children are 4 years apart, it would be conceivable that you would have your younger child in pre-K through 2 and your older child in 3 through 6. And Emily, do you have any other, some of the qualitative comments from the survey that came through as kind of thematic?
think you touched on all of them. I do have some questions here, though, I can share. When would this begin to affect our children? I know you said 5 to 10 years, but is that the start of impact, or might things happen prior to that? Example being reconfiguration of districts and when that might happen.
So we're in the middle of the 5 through 7 years, so it's not 5 through 7 years from now. The whole process is 5 to 7 years. We're gonna be ending up taking a little bit longer than that because we have this whole thing of pandemic happen in the middle. We just had been accepted as a project in December of 2019, and in March of 2020, there was the shutdown, and that impacted both the MSBA and the school district. Even though the school building committee did continue to meet, there was about a 3-month period where we had a hiatus, which took us off timeline. And when you go off timeline, it's never just a matter of go off timeline and jump back in and pick up where you left off. You have to come back in when there is an MSBA board approval meeting. So that was the first delay, was due to the pandemic. The second delay was one that the school building committee elected to do, and that was to request to move back into the eligibility period long enough for the MSBA to consider a grade span of pre-K through 2, so that we could be making the best decisions and considering the best options for the long-term health and educational programs of the district. So we're kind of in year 3 now of this 3 to 7 year process. By the end of year 4, we will be coming back to the voters to make a decision around support for a preferred option, a single preferred option. And then the other part of the question,
When you might consider reconfiguration.
so I would love to say that it would be at the time of when we would get to when the project is coming to completion. However, we've really been able to successfully fund schools and support schools. The city is very, very generous, way above and beyond net school spending. But we had the ESSER funds, which were federal subsidized funds, due to the pandemic. We had ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and now we're coming up on the completion of ESSER 3. ESSER 3 ends in September, on September 30th of 2024, which will be in FY 25. And so that fiscal year is being referred to as the fiscal cliff. And so we are looking at what might be necessary options for us to consider. In certain grade levels, we would be able to contract now to less sections. We have 6 sections, 2 sections of each grade level at each elementary school. Our enrollment does not warrant that. When you can see the enrollment report, you'll see that the National Association for the Education of Young Children recommends average class size of 24. We have class sizes of 10, 11, 14, 15, and with 6 sections, we reasonably could contract to 5 or 4 sections, depending on grade level right now. And so the ability to maintain 3 elementary schools may become a concern as we go into fiscal year 25, which would then be implemented in the fall of 25, school year 25, 26. But the direction it goes may be determined by what is happening associated with this project, so that we're not duplicating effort.
Thank you. Can you speak to how staffing numbers will be affected with option 1 as compared to option 2?
Again, it would depend on enrollment and in a particular grade span. Both scenarios will probably result in, I would say, probably 14 teaching positions at a minimum. However, we are also looking at what I refer to as the gray tsunami, which is we will be having increasing numbers of retirements over the next 3 years. And so the hope and the goal is to have those positions really eliminated through attrition. We also are running into a situation right now, this summer, where we have positions that are open and we're having a hard time filling them due to the teacher shortage that is really a national epidemic. And so there are cases right now where we may be looking to combine sections within a school in order to, because the class size is small enough that we'll be able to do that, so that we have just one class of like 20 students or 22 students, and be able to provide an education for those students without having to try to hire a second grade level teacher.
Thank you. Has there been any discussions with neighboring districts about the merging school districts or sharing resources? And might this be the appropriate time to conversations prior to building a new school?
The answer to the question is yes, if you speak to superintendents. Superintendents recognize the benefits and the need for not just the city of North Adams, but for all of our surrounding districts in Berkshire County who are also experiencing declining enrollment due to population decline. We currently have 3 shared positions with Hoosick Valley Regional School District. We share an athletic director, a data coordinator or systems manager, and we also share a facilities director. We are looking at those opportunities because those have been approved by school committees. In order for schools to enter into discussion or negotiations around developing regional agreements, that is a school committee decision and needs to be met with school committee approval. School committee are elected officials and therefore feel as rightly that they need to listen to the will of their constituents in making those decisions. And so while I'm not ruling that out, and certainly believe that that will be the future of Berkshire County, I don't necessarily believe that will remedy our financial considerations or the need for this project in the near future. Mr. Bernard.
Thank you. Tom Bernard, 20 Elder Avenue, resident, community member, non-parent.
Former parent.
Former parent. So in responding to Ben's question, you talked about socialization. Is there evidence and research around grade span schools from an equity perspective?
Well, no, the short answer is not that I'm aware of. I should say it that way. It does create equitable practices when we consider that our district is significantly disproportionate for special education services. The state average is about 17%, Mr. Simon, and we're at 24, 30%. Okay, that's gone up. Okay, so we do, and you know, and given our area, North Adams has invested in some intensive level programs to try to keep students who have an IEP, who may have multiple disabilities, in their home district. So we have a program for social emotional disabilities. We have a program for students on the autism spectrum disorder, a continuum. There's been some real investments in some very high quality programs that we also share with surrounding districts if they have need to send a student into our district for those programs. Right now, if you're a student who is in the Greylock community, but you would benefit from the Castles program. You have to go to a school that is different than the students within your community. And so your ability to connect with the students within your community and the students at your school is now, that we've now created an obstacle. And not intentionally, but it does in fact create an obstacle, particularly for students who have a disability that makes socialization really an important aspect of their overall education and community connection. If we were in grade span schools, we could eliminate that by having Castles 1 housed with the pre-K through 2, having Steeples 1 housed with the pre-K through 2, having Steeples 2 and Castles 2 housed with grades 3 through 6, because we're required by state law to stay within a 4-year age span for these programs. So that would create some equity that would allow students who are participating in that program to connect with students who also live in their community within the school.
Thank you.
It would also minimize specialized transportation for those students as they would be transported to the other school.
Yes. So I believe for both options, there was an option, there would be within that each one an option to build a new school or to renovate Brayton. If renovating Brayton is chosen, what will that look like for the students who go to Brayton?
So thank you for the question, and just for our viewing audience, for everybody who's online, there are 3 options still up for consideration. So there's renovation of Brayton Elementary School, a renovation of Greylock Elementary School, or a new school located at the Greylock site.
Oh, so if, I forgot about that. It does also, if it's renovating Greylock, but will that go right for the Greylock students?
So because we would be repurposing whichever school site is not selected by the school building committee for our preferred option, then we would have a school that we could maintain operational through the construction phase. The fastest part of the MSBA process is construction. It's 18 months to 2 years. Getting there is what takes the longest, because you have to go through the entire process of getting to a preferred option, identifying the cost for that preferred option, getting it approved by the MSBA, and then bringing it to the taxpayers to say, is this what you want? And having that vote to approve the funding for that preferred option. So it's a very, very long process until you get that yes, and then it goes really quickly. We break ground and it goes pretty quickly.
So we'd be basically looking at combining students into the non-chosen school for the short term.
Well, as I mentioned with the question from the online participant, we may in fact have to think about consolidation long before we actually have the approval and move forward with construction, whether it's a renovation, new build, whatever. Because we have to, our state aid is also an enrollment-based formula, right? And so with the declining enrollment, we have to consider the fact that in the absence of our increases associated with SOA, the ending of ESSER 3, we may have to consider consolidation long before we actually are putting a shovel in the ground to begin the process of construction.
I was reminded of another theme that came up.
Yes, ma'am.
Considerations around arrival and dismissal in terms of parent vehicles and volume. Has there been any considerations there?
Well, one thing we do know we don't want is the car line at Brayton. Because that is, if anybody wants to figure that out and try to take a look at that it is a scary time of day, because you've got the one entrance in, the one exit out, and it's a narrow entrance and exit. So as I mentioned earlier, when we talked about transportation, some of the considerations might be that we are able to allocate resources towards providing transportation irregardless of distance from the school, which is how they determine required transportation, and provide transportation for everyone in the pre-K through 2, which then there'd still be parents who would elect to drive, but they would have a different option if they needed it. So that would be a benefit. The other consideration is part of the design process. This came up at a school building committee meeting where we were looking at some different design options where they talk about a safe egress and arrival to school as part of the design process. And so we have a team of amazing architects from TSKP who have been given that charge. Where is the best location? Which is the best site? And what is the best design that will facilitate that transportation? Mr. Alkenbright.
Thank you. Yeah, Dick Alkenbright, school committee member, school building committee member, and a parent. There are a few things, and I just, to your point about the schools and the options, and please stop me, correct me when I'm wrong, because I'm sure I will be through this a little bit. But one of the options is a brand new school at Greylock. That school would be built on the footprint, but wouldn't really disrupt the existing building, as I recall. Right?
Correct.
So kids could stay there while a new school is built.
Right.
However, that, as I recall, too, was the most expensive version. I'll just say that as a point of reference. The other thing too is if you go to K2, or pre-K2, and you do it at Greylock, my understanding is the square footage footprint of the existing building would satisfy the MSBA requirement. So it would be our smallest project, incurring the least amount of cost. Am I still correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then another would be to renovate the existing Greylock. We talked about this a little bit too, and put an addition on to create the square footage for a K through 6. So all these options, right? But I guess what I'm getting to is the understanding that at some point in time, this will come to a vote of the public. And the amount it costs the community will come into play. And I'd be the last person to say that we should make our decision totally because it costs less or costs more. We should, it's a factor, but I think it will be an important factor down the road. I think my point is simply that we have if we're thinking about pre-K through 2, we have a footprint
Correct.
in the existing building that can be renovated. Yes, with a shift of kids for a period of time, but that could be renovated. And I do believe that was the lowest cost option.
To date.
To date.
What has been presented to school building committee to
Exactly,
date.
exactly. So just the thought process of, if people are wondering, these are big numbers that were presented at one point. However, they are separated by literally a couple of tens of millions of dollars. I mean, there's a big difference in the cost.
The enrollment drives the calculation of the allotted square footage that MSBA will consider reimbursement for. Anything you want beyond that, it will be a cost to the city. The current capacity of the Greylock footprint would meet that for pre-K through 2.
Right.
If we went to pre-K through 6, there would be a need for an addition at Greylock because there's insufficient square footage there. For Brayton, one of the considerations that will impact cost is the fact that this is a shared building with the Y. And the square footage associated with the Y would be a city cost and not reimbursable by the MSBA.
Right.
I have no further questions on my end.
Any further questions, comments, or concerns? Well, I believe that will help us to adjourn this meeting of the community forum. I want to thank the members of the audience who were here to participate directly. I want to thank our members of the online community who submitted their questions for consideration. We have taken notes on all of the comments, concerns, and questions, and this will be presented to our school building committee at our next meeting, as well as to the policy subcommittee meeting that is posted on the North Adams Public Schools website, as well as the city open meeting website. Policy subcommittee needs to take this into consideration because the organization of our schools is part of school district policy, which is within the purview of the North Adams Public Schools School Committee. So thank you for your participation, and Mr. Alcombright.
Next meeting, date, time, place,
The
forum.
school building committee meeting is August.
I'm sorry, the forum, the next forum.
The next forum is August 22nd at 5:30 PM at the Brayton Welcome Center, same format. So I'm hoping that more people will come out and let us know what your concerns are and what considerations you would like both the school committee and the school building committee to consider as part of this project. Thank you.
Thank you.